Sir.
That was a legend on the last one, by the way.
Oh, yeah, that was a legend. I don't know so much if people believe that these people are going to be the legends. We got to talk about it. We got Troy Weaver. We have Monty Williams. But first, I got to pay my homage to the legend, Detroit News, Rod Beard. Let me just let you guys understand something. The drum roll is because of who this man continues to show himself to be, not just as a professional, but as a person. There's a lot of people who have a lot of great things to say about Rod Beard. And I know my first couple times in these media rooms, there were some people who knew, like, hey, yeah, we see you guys show, man. It's awesome that you get this experience with Rod Beard. We were doing the Woodward Pistons podcast, and I'm telling you, we're on like episode like 108 now. We do one a week. That's a long time. And the story behind that is Rod gave me like 20 episodes that I'd never posted. And I was like, man, I was uncomfortable. I didn't know if I was doing things the right way. The patience that this man took, the mentorship that he took, the advice that he gave. And I remember my first time walking into LCA on the actual beat, like not Zoom, which was my first season. I mean, walking in there, he was there waiting for me, helped me get my credential, walked me around, got down to the media room, and I was like, and he just gave me a hug, man. I remember the first big press conference I was at, the big one, not the ones in the media room. I mean, when they have him down on the court. And again, another one of those hugs that just kind of, man, it definitely helped to lighten the tension. And like I said, I can never say enough about the mentorship as well and the advocacy. So that's why I will always do these drum rolls for him. I don't care what you guys think. I know a lot of people like him. You guys can help me out with this thing?
Of course.
Let's rock,
Let's drum roll it.
Hey, yo! Shout out and welcome to the legend, Detroit News, Rod Beard, brother. Thank you as always for your time. We'll kick it away with Rod's thoughts first.
This season is almost over. It is, since the beginning of the year, this is the time that you've been waiting for, is the end of this season. And I don't know what you can even look forward to. It's not the draft. Yeah, I got nothing. I got nothing on what to look forward to, except that you can watch better basketball in the playoffs.
Yeah.
This team is something.
It's something, man. It's something. Listen, there was a lot of expectation kind of going into the season. And by a lot, I don't mean where we thought they were going to be a playoff team, but there's a lot of people who didn't believe that they were going to win less games than the Detroit Lions and the Michigan Wolverine football teams. This thing, they're going to set the franchise low in wins. That was something that I wanted them to be able to have a little bit of pride about and say, you know what, we can't stoop to that level. I believe with the young talent that they've acquired and the expectation that should have been placed on them, I really wanted to see this team do better than that. A lot of us had them placed to be able to win between 25 and 30 games this season. I thought they had the recipe and the makeup to do so, and then they went on a historic losing streak. I can't even call their start a hot start. I think that it was one that it was 2-1, no. And then absolute oblivion. The pits of hell opened up after that, man. You can't call that, because there's some people say, man, they got off to a hot start. I'm not going to be tricked by the Tigers' hot start. Guys,
who said they got off to a hot start?
There are people who say there are. I'm telling you, across social media, in the chat, there are people who say that they're not going to be fooled by the Tigers' hot start because of the Pistons' hot start. I'm like, whoa. Sam is over here. Sam is over here having a conniption right now.
This is a hot start. Good.
It was 2-1, and then it was
that's
all
like 1/6
over.
of their season wins, though. That's the majority of the season.
Yeah.
Didn't the Texas Rangers have more wins in October than the Pistons did?
Bro.
That's one World Series win.
Listen, man, it's getting to the point. I had to wear this just to remind myself that I do love the history and the lore of the Detroit Pistons, but this feels like it's gone on too long. It feels like it has. Now, overall, especially when you're looking at the Detroit Red Wings and the Detroit Pistons, the Red Wings have been rebuilding for just one more year longer to this point underneath Yzerman than the Pistons have underneath Troy Weaver. The Pistons have made the playoffs 2 times, to the Red Wings 1 time. I'm still hoping the Red Wings will even that up in the last 7 to 8 years. That's kind of what the records are between these 2 teams right now. 2 teams that have been going on extensive rebuilds. I do trust the Yzer plan. I can see the foundation. Like you stated earlier, The Red Wings are competing right now. They're playing meaningful games at the end of the season. But that was an expectation that Troy Weaver said he wanted to see the Detroit Pistons do, to compete every single night. He said, we finally have the recipe for this. But there might have been some things that he did or didn't do in this previous offseason that really hampered this team. He made the decision to say, you know what, we're not going to make our big splash of splashes until this upcoming free agency. And he said that 7 days before. I know there's a lot of people say, well, then why did he sign Joe Harris? Why did he spend the money this way? Why did he acquire this? Why did he acquire that? Those were effectively cap holds. And I understand the strategy. I get the strategy, and we've discussed it. We've discussed it a lot. But I don't believe he did this team any good. I don't believe he did the draft picks that he selected any good by the construction of this year's team. Can you get by with it the last 2 or 3 years of this restore or rebuild? Yes, you could. This was the season, though, that I believed this young team needed to be what was really driving the engine of what this Detroit Pistons team could look like in the future. Just like we can look at the Detroit Red Wings and see how a lot of their young players or homegrown talent are absolutely driving this thing forward. Then you can go and figure out exactly what is needed on this team. With the Detroit Pistons, and my first question to you, Rod, is this. I appreciate the young core here, and I do believe that they can work with the right amount of veteran talent around it. But I do want to ask you this. How many untouchables do you see on this roster?
Same two. Same two that I've been saying. Cade and Jalen Duren are the only two that I would say I do not want to trade. I can listen to trades for either one, but I'm probably not going to. It has to be something that just knocks your sock off to say I'm giving up on either one of those two.
Yep. And that's where my attention kind of lies, because it's like we've talked about this too. The contract windows are open as it relates to when these young players are going to have to kind of re-up and sign these next contracts. Do you have any hope? And this is my second question. Now I have a third one before I kick it over to Sam. The third one is going to be the one where we kind of bring up our two guests here. Do you have any hope that the Detroit Pistons can turn this thing around this summer to some measurable expectation?
To what? Give me a measurable.
Where we can see the future, where this is a solid team that can at least win 30, and not 30 games as it relates to kind of lucking up, but they can make the requisite additions, veterans, maybe a big-time player, and have this team in a path where they can at least get back to the expectation that we believe they could have hit this season.
There's a pathway to it, I think. You need 2 all-stars. And this is the drum we've been beating for a while now. You need 2 all-stars, or an all-star and an all-star caliber player. I don't know if you have the assets to go get both. But something in free agency and something in a trade is possible. I don't think there's anybody in the draft that's going to make a big enough difference that's going to be the pathway. You've got to trade this pick for somebody who's almost there. I was going to say Tyrese Maxey, but not Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey, like 2 years ago, or maybe even a year ago, that was right on that cusp of breaking out and being something. And you've got to sell that team that somebody in this draft is going to be much bigger. So you've got to do some kind of subterfuge in all of this and say, you've got to bring guys in for pre-draft workouts, and you've got to put out some intelligence that, hey, this guy looked really, really, really good. Almost a Darko-like spy sequence where you've got to say, oh man, this dude is that deal. We're really high on Czar or something like that. You've got to put that level of deception out there to make people think that you're so hot and heavy for one of these picks that you're going to go and do it, and they're going to miss out by not making this pick. That's the level that it would have to go to for the draft pick to turn into something. And I can't even think of a guy who's you'd say, hey, if they get the number 1, number 2 pick, trade them and get this guy. I don't know that there is somebody who's right there that I would feel like, hey, that's that dude. And this is a guy that another team is willing to give up on to give you for that number 1 pick. That's an unknown.
Yeah, and listen, this is number 3 because it all ties in. We talk about the young core, and if there's any untouchables, we talk about what are the potentials for this team to be able to kind of strike the way that they stated that they're going to strike. But then third, who's going to be responsible for that? And it's just kind of a 2-part question. One, how much responsibility, how do you split kind of what we see this year as it relates to the Pistons kind of falling apart? How do you split that blame between Troy Weaver and Monty Williams? And then 2, should these be the guys that are at the helm in their same positions next season?
I'm always the same on this stuff. If you say somebody's got to go, you got to tell me who you're going to bring in. Because if it's not anything better and you're just trying to make change for the sake of change, then don't do it. There's no point in doing that. So Monty Williams, you're not eating that contract. I don't care what anybody says. You're not eating that contract. You're not giving that guy $60 million to go away. I can't see that. Troy Weaver, you can have an opinion either way on that, and you can say that he's had a bad hand that he's been dealt, and he's played a hand poorly. You can make either one of those assertions and be sort of right. But I don't know where you go next. And if you're starting over with a new GM and a new coach, you're not winning for 4 years. Legit, 4 years. If you start over with a new GM, it's pretty much the same. You're pretty much talking 3 years. A new coach, if you have the talent in a new coach, you can kind of figure it out. But a new GM is going to want to clean house and do everything differently. So if people are not happy with the losing kind of dive that they're on right now, go get a new coach and a new GM and see how long it takes to turn that whole thing around, and look around the league and see how long a pair has taken to really reach some success. When you do both of them at the same time, how long does that take to turn that around? And it's not anything encouraging at all.
Well, Rod, I think we all can acknowledge that this isn't the season that any of us envisioned when the Pistons started the year, especially given the fact that if you would have told me you got 62 games of, I would say, all-star level numbers from Cade Cunningham, plus you brought in who you thought was your big hire head coach and Monty Williams, who turned out really not to be, at least in this year, you would have never thought you would lose less games this season or win less games this season than the previous year. So I give you all that to just ask you, if you were to look at one major culprit, if you were to look at what is the biggest reason why the Pistons have lost so many games and played so poorly this year, what would it be to you?
It's the circumstance. And it's been like this for a few years, more or less. Injuries, and you can't blame injuries on anybody. I think there's something that's so. I don't think it's Troy Weaver specifically, though he hasn't helped himself in a lot of ways. But do you look at the injuries that they've had? And the tail end of this season, when they traded away a lot of their assets at the deadline, that's because you have to. In that situation, what are you going to do with these expiring contracts? He got the expiring contracts. You can say, well, hey, he should have traded some of these guys when they had a lot more value. But at the same time, he thought that those guys would be the key to getting toward a playoff run this year. So it's just like anything else. You play a hand of blackjack, you lose. Is it the dealer's fault or the player's fault? Sometimes it's neither. It's the cards. If you didn't get the right cards and you made the right play, then and it just didn't turn out right for you, you got an 11, you said hit me, you got a 2, and then you got a 10. Well, I mean, is that your fault? No, that's just dumb luck sometimes, and that's the situation. So I think fans are always in that blame somebody, and yeah, Troy Weaver's on the line. That's how basketball works. It's not cards the same sort of way, but sometimes it's not a person's fault. It's not Tom Gores. It's not in every situation, but sometimes they're the person who's in the hot seat, and sometimes you just have to lose a job because of that. I get that part of it too.
I know you kind of mentioned it earlier when you were talking to Kool-Aid, but I just wanted to ask you just like point blank. Do you think next year is a year when you will actually see improvement in the win column from these Detroit Pistons?
Oh my gosh, we better. My goodness.
I mean, improvement is 20, and 20 is still a horrible season.
Yeah.
So I think there will be improvement, but it's how you measure things. And we talked about this from last season. Is 17 wins last year, was that really the number of wins that they had? No, they would have been in the 20s easily, but everybody was vying for that number one pick. So you can't always look at the number as a gauge of what that team was. You got to look at the eye test and say, what is this good basketball? And a lot of the times the answer is no. And the Pistons are not playing good basketball. I'm not trying to under any illusion about that. But it is very much, is something going in the right direction? Is Cade Cunningham the player, the franchise player that you thought he was? Yes. Is Jalen Duren another piece? Yes. Did they add other pieces to that? Is Asar Thompson kind of that they had at the time? Probably. Is Jaden Ivey a piece that can be good for you moving forward?
I really like Simone Fontecchio.
Right. So are the pieces there? Can they be better? Yeah, but you need certain stuff. If you're making a stew and you don't have any chicken or you don't have any protein to go in it, it's not going to be a good stew. And that's kind of what we're looking at. Is there are pieces there, but the main ingredient is going to be this all-star, this veteran that's going to lift them up. And this is the year that we thought that Bogey might be something like that, or they might be able to do something at the deadline to augment the roster, and they just haven't been able to do that. So just you can and I can see that people will say that is Troy Weaver's fault, and I get it. I'm not protecting Troy Weaver. I'm just saying it's not all his fault, and it's maybe not as much of his fault as people want to say either.
Yeah, and those are good points too. You know, Randy Smalley in the chat, he said a new GM that can work with Monty to get him the guys he needs to win. Now, to be fair, because I want to make sure we're being fair, there's no defending the product as currently constructed. There's no defending kind of how this thing has gone, how this season has gone on paper, and in a lot of ways worse than last season. But Troy Weaver wasn't necessarily given the option to be able to assess what Monty Williams would want. This team was being built a certain way, and Troy Weaver still to this point has not been able or allowed to hire his own coach. He had a coaching search, and the coach that's currently here has a completely different system in place that does need and require veteran leaders. We saw it the same way as well with the Phoenix Suns when they brought in Chris Paul. That really helped to supercharge where this team was going. And before that, there were a bunch of young players that he was able to take from 19 wins all the way up to the cusp of the playoffs when they had that kind of perfect run through the bubble. But now you're looking at this situation where it's like, I want to try and be balanced with this thing. I do believe in what Troy Weaver was stating. Hey, look, we're going to have the capital to be able to make something happen this year. But I just hope that these guys have this thing figured out if they're going to be the ones back. Based on the things that I'm feeling, I do believe that those are going to be the same two at the helm next season. Monty Williams as head coach and Troy Weaver as GM. And what I'm hoping is that both of those guys get the opportunity to sink or swim based on their own merit of work. By that, I mean that Troy Weaver is given the opportunity to just do work. Nobody else necessarily from the front office or even ownership that can collude or not collude, but can convolute his vision for this squad. I just want to be able to see him now with Monty Williams at the helm be able to do that. And I want to be able to see Monty Williams get the types of players that he wants to coach. Because from the beginning of the season, and it was odd to hear him say this even in training camp, Monty Williams told all the media, this is not the type of team that I'm used to coaching. This does not necessarily fit my style and my system. And so he kind of put that out there from the beginning of the season. And then we saw it kind of play itself out as it relates to some of the lineups early on. So right now, the thing that Detroit Pistons fans and supporters and Detroit sports fans in general, the hope right now is that those two, in my opinion, are able to just do the work that they see fit. I know that there's been a lot of noise about Tobias Harris as a potential candidate this offseason. I don't know how I necessarily feel about that as a free agent pick, but I do know that there are some other less heralded players, especially even on the Philadelphia 76ers, like Kelly Oubre, who played for Monty Williams before, and some of his comments I was able to look up. He definitely has and had a good opinion of Monty Williams as a head coach. You know, I'm hoping that this squad can go out there and put together some players and some pieces like that, some Kelly Oubre's of the world. But I'm in total alignment with you and in total alignment with what Troy Weaver said this plan has to be this offseason. You got to go out there and you have to get 2 impact players. I don't know how just 1 impact player makes a difference here. And I saw somebody else in the chat earlier say, well, how do you get those guys here? Well, money is going to have to be the talk for Detroit Pistons this free agency. What's good, brother?
All right. I haven't worked this out completely. Would you trade the number 1 pick to, let's say the Pelicans don't really get what they want out of the rest of this season? Would you trade the number 1 pick to for Brandon Ingram, who's on his contract expires next year? He's making $36 million next year.
Pick. Yes. Bro, whatever you need to make that happen. And the Pelicans is a team that I've heard around the practice facility, around, you know, some of the media, things that we know that there's some teams that might be either disgruntled or teams that are looking to make a change to be able to better bolster their future, both financially as well as with the fit of some of their players. And Ingram and the Pelicans were one of those teams that we were told keep an eye on. Man, listen, if you're telling me Cade and Duren are your untouchables, anything else you need, including eating part of that contract for Brandon Ingram, I say yes yesterday, bro. Yesterday. Make it happen.
But it's only 1 year left on it. And at 36, I can do that. I can do Brandon Ingram. I can do Brandon Ingram's contract for 36 for next year, and then it's expiring. So if it doesn't work with whatever other player you go out and get, then you don't have to repay him, but I think you get his bird rights too. Yeah, I could. So that's the type of thing that you've got to look at and say, the Pelicans might want one of these young guys. They might want to do a slow little reboot, and maybe he's not happy there, and you can try to move on from that. But if you're talking about how this can happen, that's it. So you give me Tobias, Brandon Ingram. I can see where you can start doing some stuff. I feel a whole lot better about the roster at that point than I do right now.
Yeah, definitely. Look, it's going to be an interesting thing this summer. I just wanted to make sure that we did give some attention to. We talk a lot about the players. We do talk a lot about Troy Weaver from different aspects. But I know that a lot of the scuttlebutt on social media, especially within Pistons Twitter, has been about the security, the job security of Monty Williams and Troy Weaver. I think you added a lot of good context to the conversation. I can't wait to see what a lot of other people are going to feel and think about that as well. This will be posted on Woodward Pistons later too, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discourse there. They have the capital. They have all the assets to make this thing happen. Now it's just a matter of, can they get this thing done the right way? Because they've had that the last couple of off seasons. But Rod, any last thoughts, man?
No, man, you guys are always hitting the right points, and I think this is an interesting conversation. But again, I'll maintain, you can't just get rid of people because you don't think they're doing the job. You got to go get somebody else. And certainly in Monty's case, you got to write a big check if you don't think he's the answer to that. And that was some of the question in the very beginning, is that if you're going to make him the highest paid, he better be able to turn something around quickly. Otherwise, you're eating a horrible contract that isn't going to be worth it once it all is said and done. And so, again, I say that anytime people talk about firing a coach, firing a GM, who are you going to get? Tell me who you're going to get.
Hey, that's fair. That's fair. Thank you, as always, Rob, for your time. We went around the city in the first segment. I had to kind of break down these Detroit Pistons, especially as the season is coming to a close. Exit interviews are right around the corner. The last home game is tomorrow night. That's why I thought it was appropriate to wear the shirts that they gave out on opening day as well. It was we went from way up here. We have boots on the ground. Our whole Woodward family was kind of in there to just what is going on now. But Rob Beard, thank you so much, man, for getting on here and giving us a little bit of good news and a little bit of bad news on today's show.
All right, gentlemen. Enjoy your Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You
Rod.
too, brother. Blessings. And you know what? I got a little bit more good news and a little bit more bad news. Bad news is insurance rates are up in the state of Michigan, man. That's not a surprise to any of us.